The dog did this, and it changed his family's life forever. The scratching started at 3 in the morning, not the usual gentle pawing that meant Duke needed to go outside. This was different. Frantic. Desperate. Duke's claws scraped against the bedroom door with an urgency that made Sarah's heart skip a beat before she was even fully awake. In 7 years, their golden retriever had never made sounds like this. Never. "What's wrong, boy?" Sarah whispered, stumbling out of bed. The moment she opened the door, Duke grabbed her pajama sleeve in his teeth. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to pull. He'd never done that before either. His brown eyes locked onto hers, and in them, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Fear. Raw, primal fear. Duke led her down the hallway, past the family photos that lined the walls, past the kids' rooms where 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Jake slept peacefully. He didn't stop at his water bowl or the back door. Instead, he pulled her toward the basement stairs. The door was closed, just as they'd left it after bringing up the Christmas decorations the night before. But Duke whined, a high-pitched sound that made the hair on Sarah's arm stand up. "Tom!" she called softly to her husband, but Duke barked, sharp, loud, a sound that said there was no time. She opened the basement door, and that's when she smelled it. Gas. The unmistakable odor of natural gas, stronger than she'd ever smelled it before. Her hand flew to the light switch, then froze. No electricity. No sparks. Duke was already halfway down the stairs, looking back at her, urging her to follow. But follow him where? Into a basement, filling with gas? Every instinct told her to grab the kids and run. Get out. Call 911 from the neighbor's house. But Duke barked again, and something in that sound made her trust him. She'd raised him from a puppy. He'd been there when both kids were born, gentle as a lamb despite his size. He'd never led them wrong. Sarah covered her nose and mouth with her sleeve and followed him down. The smell was overwhelming now, making her eyes water. Duke went straight to the far corner, behind the old furnace, to a section of the house they rarely visited. He pawed at something on the ground. A blanket. An old moving blanket they'd thrown down there years ago. Why was he? Then she saw it. The blanket wasn't lying flat. It was covering something. Someone. A small figure, curled up tight. Sarah's heart stopped. She dropped to her knees and pulled back the blanket. A child. A little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, unconscious but breathing. His skin was pale, too pale, and his lips had a bluish tint. "Oh my God!" Sarah scooped him into her arms. He was so light, too light. Duke was already at the stairs, looking back, making sure she followed. They had to get out. Now, she ran up the stairs, the child clutched to her chest, Duke at her heels. "Tom!" she screamed this time, not caring who she woke. "Get the kids! Gas leak! Get out!" The next few minutes were a blur. Tom stumbling from their room, confused but responding to the panic in her voice. Grabbing Emma and Jake, who protested sleepily until they saw their mother carrying a strange child. All of them spilling out onto the front lawn in their pajamas. Mrs. Henderson from next door coming out to see what the commotion was about. The call to 911. The sirens. The fire department. The paramedics who took the little boy from her arms and put an oxygen mask over his face. "Ma'am, you saved his life," one of them said. "Another hour in that basement, maybe less." He didn't finish. He didn't need to, but Sarah hadn't saved him. She looked down at Duke, who sat pressed against her leg, still trembling. "He knew," she whispered. Somehow, he knew. The gas company found the leak within an hour. A corroded pipe in the basement, probably damaged during last month's earthquake. The one everyone said was too small to worry about. The gas had been seeping in slowly, pooling in the basement since the foundation naturally sealed it from escaping. If it had found an ignition source, a pilot light, a spark from the furnace kicking on, would have taken out half the block, the technician said quietly. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was the boy. The police came, gentle but thorough with their questions. Who was he? How did he get in their basement? Sarah and Tom had no answers. They'd been in the basement just the night before. He hadn't been there then. The basement had a small window, old and loose in its frame, big enough for a small child to squeeze through if he was desperate enough. It took 2 days to piece together the truth. 2 days of the boy recovering in the hospital, too weak and disoriented to speak. 2 days of police searching, asking questions, following leads. 2 days of Sarah and Tom taking shifts at the hospital, sitting by the bed of a child they didn't know but somehow already felt responsible for. His name was Marcus, 5 years old. He'd been missing for 3 days from a foster home 2 towns over. Not a bad home, the social worker assured them, just overwhelmed, too many kids, not enough attention. Marcus had slipped out during the chaos of dinner time, looking for something, though nobody knew what. He keeps asking about a dog, the social worker said on the second day. A golden dog? We don't know what he means. The foster family doesn't have any pets. Sarah's hand found Duke's head. They'd brought him to the hospital parking lot and she'd been walking him when the social worker found her. Can I bring Duke to see him? It wasn't exactly protocol, but the social worker had seen enough to know when rules needed bending. They smuggled Duke up the back stairs, and the moment Marcus saw him, his whole face transformed. "Sonny!" he cried, reaching out with thin arms. "You found me, Sonny!" Duke, their Duke, who'd never met this child before, went straight to him, gentle as always, careful of the IV lines and monitor wires. He laid his big head on the bed next to Marcus's hand, and the little boy buried his fingers in the golden fur. He had a dog, the social worker said softly. Before he came into the system, his grandmother's dog. A golden retriever named Sonny. When she died last year, the dog went to a shelter. Marcus went to foster care. He's been looking for Sonny ever since. Sarah's throat closed up. That's why he was in our basement. He saw Duke somehow. Thought he was. Dogs of the same breed can look very similar to a young child, the social worker said. He probably followed your dog home, found a way in when it got cold, hid because he was scared you'd send him away. Tom's hand found Sarah's shoulder. He could have died down there, but he hadn't. Because somehow, impossibly, Duke had known, had sensed what humans couldn't, had refused to let a little boy die alone in the dark. Even a little boy he'd never met. A little boy who just wanted his dog back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings and paperwork and decisions that felt both impossible and inevitable. Emma and Jake had been asking questions since that first night. Why couldn't Marcus stay with them? Why did he have to go back to strangers? Why couldn't they help? We're not foster parents, Sarah had explained gently. There are rules, procedures. But Emma, wise beyond her 8 years, had simply said, then become foster parents. It wasn't that simple. Nothing ever was. Background checks and home studies and training classes, courts and lawyers and social workers, months of work compressed into weeks, because sometimes, just sometimes, the system recognized when something was meant to be. When a family was already forming, with or without permission, Marcus stayed in the hospital for a week. Sarah and Tom were there every day. Duke, too, when they could manage it. The little boy who'd barely spoken those first days began to open up, to smile, to laugh, when Duke performed his repertoire of tricks. He told them about his grandmother, about Sonny, about how scared he'd been since she left. She's in heaven, he said matter-of-factly. With Sonny. But I thought maybe Sonny came back for me. Sarah had to turn away to hide her tears. Tom's voice was rough when he said, Duke's not Sonny, buddy. But he's a pretty good dog, too. And he likes you a lot. I know he's not Sonny, Marcus said, small hand never leaving Duke's fur. Sonny was old, Duke's young. But he found me anyway. He knew I needed help. The foster family Marcus had run from wasn't bad, just overwhelmed. They were relieved when Sarah and Tom expressed interest in fostering. The social worker fast-tracked their application. The judge, hearing the story, expedited the placement. 3 months after Duke woke them in the night, Marcus came home, not for a visit. Home. He stood in the doorway with his single garbage bag of possessions, eyes wide and uncertain. Duke broke the tension, bounding over and nearly knocking him down with enthusiasm. Marcus giggled, a sound that filled the house like sunshine. Is this really my room? He asked, staring at what had been the guest room, now painted blue with dog-themed decorations that Emma and Jake had insisted on. Really yours, Sarah confirmed. And I can stay? Even if I'm bad? Tom knelt down to Marcus's level. You're not going anywhere, buddy. Good days, bad days, whatever comes. You're family now. Marcus looked at Duke, then at Emma and Jake hovering in the doorway, then at Sarah and Tom. Because Duke found me? "Because Duke knew you belonged here," Sarah said. "Even before we did." The adoption was finalized a year later. Marcus was thriving. He'd started school, made friends, and learned to ride the bike Tom had bought him. He still had nightmares sometimes, still occasionally asked about his grandmother. But he also laughed freely, played wild games with Emma and Jake, and told everyone who would listen about how his dog saved his life. Because that's how he saw it. Duke was his dog now. Not a replacement for Sunny, but something new. Something that proved that love could find you even in the darkest places. Even in a basement filling with gas, when hope seemed lost. The gas leak, the firefighters later explained, had been a ticking time bomb. The corroded pipe could have failed catastrophically at any moment. If Duke hadn't woken them, if they hadn't evacuated when they did, the explosion would have been devastating. 5 lives saved, because one dog refused to let a little boy's story end in darkness. But Sarah knew it was more than that. Duke hadn't just saved them from the gas, he'd brought them Marcus. He'd completed their family in a way they hadn't even known was missing. Some nights, she watched the 4 of them, Tom and the 3 kids, playing with Duke in the backyard, and she marveled at how differently it could have ended. The investigators said Duke must have heard something, sensed the danger in a way humans couldn't. Maybe that was true. Or maybe, just maybe, some bonds transcend explanation. Maybe Duke had sensed not just the danger, but the little boy who needed a family. The family who needed him. "Mom!" Marcus called from the backyard where he was trying to teach Duke a new trick. "Watch this!" Sarah went to the window. Marcus threw a ball, and Duke bounded after it, golden fur shining in the afternoon sun. Just a boy and his dog. Nothing extraordinary about it, except for everything that was. Tom joined her at the window, slipping an arm around her waist. "Did you ever think—" he started, then stopped. "That a gas leak would give us our son?" Sarah finished. "Never, but that's how life works sometimes. The worst moments becoming the best. Tragedy transforming into blessing. A little boy looking for his lost dog finding a whole family instead. And at the center of it all, a golden retriever who somehow knew exactly what everyone needed, even when they didn't know themselves." Duke brought the ball back to Marcus, tail wagging furiously. Marcus hugged him tight, whispering something in his ear that made Duke's tail wag even harder. Probably telling him he was a good boy. The best boy. The boy who saved everyone. And he was. God help them all, he absolutely was. Emma and Jake ran outside to join their brother, and soon all 3 kids were rolling in the grass with Duke, their laughter carrying on the wind. Mrs. Henderson watched from her porch next door, smiling at the scene. She'd been there that terrible night, had seen them all spill onto the lawn in panic. Now she watched them enjoy, complete in a way they hadn't been before. "Should we tell him?" Tom asked quietly. "When he's older. About that night?" Sarah considered. Marcus knew he'd been found in their basement. He knew Duke had saved him. But the full story, the danger they'd all been in, the fact that his hiding spot had nearly become a tomb. When he's ready, she decided. When he needs to know that sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most beautiful endings. For now, it was enough that he was safe, that he was loved, that he had a family who would never let him go, and a dog who would always find him when he was lost. Some stories didn't need all their details told at once. Some truths could wait until the heart was ready to hold them. Duke barked from the yard, and Sarah smiled. 7 years they'd had him, and he'd never once let them down. But that night, that impossible night when he'd woken them with desperate scratching, he'd done more than save their lives. He'd shown them that family wasn't just about blood or birth or even choice. Sometimes it was about recognition, about knowing, deep in your bones, that someone belonged with you. Marcus belonged with them, had always belonged, even before they knew he existed. It just took a gas leak and a golden retriever to bring him home. "Best dog ever," Tom murmured, and Sarah nodded. Best dog ever. From the yard, Marcus's voice carried clearly, "I love you, Duke." And in that moment, in the golden afternoon light, with her complete family playing in the yard, Sarah knew that Duke had understood something that night that she was only beginning to grasp. Love wasn't just about saving the people you knew. It was about recognizing the ones you hadn't met yet, the ones who needed you, the ones who would make you whole. Duke had known Marcus was family before any of them, had risked everything to save a little boy he'd never met, because somehow, in the mysterious way of dogs, he'd known that little boy was theirs. would always be theirs. The gas leak was fixed now, the basement safe. But sometimes Sarah still found Duke down there, lying in the corner where they'd found Marcus. Not anxious or afraid, just watching, guarding, making sure that if anyone else needed finding, he'd be ready. Because that's what family did. They found each other, they saved each other, they chose each other, over and over in big moments and small ones. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you had a dog who understood that better than anyone. A dog who would wake you at 3 in the morning and change your life forever. A dog like Duke. The dog who did the impossible and gave them their son. If Duke's story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed an act of unexpected kindness from an animal? Or maybe you have your own rescue story to share. Stories like Duke's remind us that heroism comes in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes the smallest acts of courage make the biggest difference. If you enjoyed this journey with Duke and Marcus, consider subscribing to our channel for more heartwarming stories that celebrate the incredible bond between humans and animals. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful tales of hope, loyalty, and love. And who knows, your own story might inspire our next episode. Until next time, remember that even in our darkest moments, we all have the power to be someone's hero.